I know we're early, so I'm going to start with a little music just to get us going. It is White Ferrari by Frank Ocean. I don't know if we have any Frank Ocean fans out there, but we're just going to get our nervous systems ready for the presentation. And this song actually captures the idea of the passage of time. So just take a moment as we get ready to begin and listen up. On these rides, mine on the road, your dilated eyes, watch the clouds float, white Ferrari, had a good time. 16, how was I supposed to know? I let you out at Central, I didn't care to stay the plane, kept my mouth closed, we're both so familiar. So while folks are joining, I'm playing some music to get us in the mood, just to get our nervous systems reset. This is Frank Ocean, White Ferrari. It's a great song. And I'm just going to give us a minute or two, and then we'll fade it out and we'll get going. So I text the speeds, less the speeds, Texas speed, yes. Basic Texas toll on me eventually, yes. Incidentally, with our cohort, we try to start with a movie clip or music, because learning doesn't begin well when we're beginning with cortisol, we found. It's a good way to help students get engaged and focused. It's also a way for us to get to know each other. All right. Good times. If we have time at the end, I'll finish out with the song. So, welcome everyone to our executive functioning cohort in service today. We're really excited to see you. I know there's been a lot of chatter on Facebook, and we're just so glad you're here. Okay. Little bit of housekeeping. On our Wednesday Facebook Live, we had some major technical issues. Excuse me. We went dark for a few minutes. If that happens again, please hang tough with us. It took us a few minutes to restart. We're not really sure why. It happened. We regrouped and we got things going again. So if we lose you, just so you're aware, we've got a backup plan. My colleague Jeannie is on with us today. She's going to be helping to navigate the comments. And Jeannie is our admin here at the Parents and Children Project. I'm going to tell you a little bit about us in just a few moments. But before we get going, if people can take some time in the chat or as you're joining, if you can please let us know sort of who you are. Are you a parent looking to learn more? Are you a student? Are you a provider? If you could just drop that information in, that would be really helpful for us as we move through the evening today. We're going to be meeting for 1 hour. And then my last caveat is that I have the flu. So you're going to have to be dealing with some Kleenex. I apologize. And some coughing. But we're going to get through, and I'm going to ride the wave of the excitement of the material, and we'll be doing fine. All right. So please just drop in the chat who you are, and we're going to get going here. So I'm Elizabeth Wilkins-McKee. I'm the founder and owner of the Parents and Children Project here in Manassas, Virginia. Our practice provides cradle-to-grave services. We work with parents, children, adults, and families across developmental stages. We are all trained as generalists. We have coaches, we have LCSWs, we have educators, we have educational consultants, and we work together to maximize the expertise we have in neurodivergent affirming care and special needs parenting, as well as providing executive functioning support. And then also, we do a lot of work with folks with chronic illness and in the perinatal mental health world. So that sort of summarizes who we are and what we do. We're here for a lot of reasons. I personally, this has been a dream of mine to put a one-stop shop together. I started my career in community mental health, moved to a group practice, moved to outpatient services in a psychiatric hospital, and eventually as healthcare changed and mental health care changed, and when I became a parent of two autistic children, I just kept thinking there's got to be a better way to do all of this. And what my lived experience was, and then looking at the data that was out there and how challenging it was to get services for kids and get everything to work together. A whole bunch of us got our heads together and said, what if we all work together? What if we all work together under one roof? And so that's what we're doing. And our executive functioning cohort is the one of the programs that we're running that utilizes our cross-disciplinary skill set. So in every executive functioning cohort, there is one mental health provider and one educator, just as a point of reference. So our executive functioning cohorts are available nationwide, and it allows us, because we do them on Zoom, it allows us to work with families and professionals across the country. Before we get started, does anyone have any questions, logistical questions today? We're going to be done by 8 p.m. sharp. Okay. All right. So I'm going to get going here then. So when we talk about executive functioning, we are talking about the mental processes that help us plan, focus, remember, shift from in between tasks, and manage competing demands. I think, or historically, someone out of Harvard at some time, I don't remember who this was, referred to the executive function is like the air traffic control system of the brain. Excuse me. I like to think of it as more of the conductor or stage manager, is frankly, I got tired of talking about it as an air traffic control system throughout my career. And so let me follow that analogy all the way through. Okay. I want you to picture a really busy airport. We've all been there. Planes are taking off, others are landing. Some are circling because the runway is full. A few are delayed. A few are trying to land at the same time. All of this is happening, and the airport is your brain on a normal day. And the part that keeps it from turning into utter chaos is your executive functioning skill set, or it's really mostly in this part of the brain. Okay. So executive function is the air traffic control tower in this analogy. It does not fly the planes. It directs them. It decides what gets attention now, what has to wait, what can safely land, what needs to circle a little longer. When executive functioning is working, things feel organized enough even when life is busy. I want to say that again. When executive functioning is working well, things feel organized enough even when life is busy. So when it's not, everything starts competing at once. Thoughts, emotions, homework, chores, social demands, all of those things try to land on the same runway. Another way to think about this, as I mentioned, is executive functioning is the conductor. The conductor doesn't play the violin or play the cello. They help everyone come in at the right time. They manage the dynamics, they manage the pacing, they manage the overall piece, right? And they bring a coherence to a lot of moving parts. For many of the kids and teens we work with, especially neurodivergent kids, The instruments are all there. The intelligence is there. The motivation is often there. What is missing is consistent, reliable conducting. Executive functioning develops slowly and unevenly, and research consistently shows that it's closely tied to brain development, stress load, sleep, and mental health. Pardon me. Large scale studies, and I can provide you the references later, but they're from JAMA and then the American Psychological Association, among many, many others, show that executive functioning skills are stronger predictors of academic functioning, emotional regulation, and long-term well-being. They're stronger predictors than IQ. So for those of you that were raised in the 80s, you might remember there was all this pressure about how smart your kid you were, or what your IQ was. That really lots of people. So just because someone has a high IQ doesn't necessarily mean that their life is going to be more happy, more enjoyable, more functional, or anything like that. That's sort of the IQ is, if you think about your brain as a car, your IQ is like, what kind of motor do you have? Executive functioning is something that is, again, a larger predictor of overall well-being. It is also highly sensitive to chronic stress, anxiety, and depression and trauma. But the good news is that unlike IQ, executive functioning is for many, many people teachable. It is for sure supportable, and we can scaffold around it. So just pause for a minute. If you have a student or know a student who struggles with executive functioning challenges, right? There's a lot we can do for that. And the good news is there's a lot of data about that. Before I begin, I want to give a lot of credit to Dr. Russell Barkley, who is arguably the leader in executive functioning research. We're quoting a lot of his material here. We've taken some of his material, we've mixed it in with our experiences. We've also mixed it in with the work of Dr. Krista Neff and Christopher Germer and some other practitioners, and we'll be talking about those later. So if we go back for a minute, the good news, as I was saying, is with the right tools, right environment, right kind of support, we can strengthen the air traffic control system. We can help kids learn how to sequence, plan, initiate, pause, recover, and re-engage. That's pretty exciting news for those of us who are parents of kids with executive functioning challenges. Okay. What you need to know about this slide is across fields, there may be a little bit of debate about what are the official areas of executive functioning, working memory, self-monitoring, etc. The differences across fields and from researchers are really quite slight, and they're relevant for providers to be aware of. What you need to know about this list is what the main issues we see and the main overall complaint we see from students. There are a few of them. I'm tired of all the negative self-talk about the fact that I can't do the things I want to do, that I'm a chronic procrastinator, that I get overwhelmed, and I'm a disappointment to people. Because my intention is to empty the dishwasher, but I forget. So all of these different areas work together, and we're going to be addressing them. And we chose this particular list because these are the areas where we can have the most impact and biggest bang for your buck in terms of helping students make small changes that have a large impact. And we'll talk a little bit about what procrastination is. But for those of you who are on the call here and are really struggling with the procrastination that you're seeing at home or in the classroom, please understand procrastination is not a willpower thing. It really is not. If you're from my generation, you were taught that it was willpower. And what you need to know is if these kids could just start, they most certainly would. they need assistance figuring out how to do that. And that assistance is what we call scaffolding. And part of the cohort is to help them figure out what kind of scaffolding they need, what kind of scaffolding they prefer, in what ways are they going to ask you to help scaffold supports, and then in what ways are they going to provide scaffolding for themselves, okay? One point I realized I did not make at the beginning is that our executive functioning cohorts are for anyone who is a rising high school student all the way through college, okay? So our goal is not about theory. Our goal is not about how all of these necessarily work together in the research sense. Our goal is about precision with each student. And we're going to talk about what that looks like, how we assess that, and how do we help students develop practical plans for themselves. We're talking about practical improvement in how students function at home, at school, and in their daily lives. Okay, RY. This is a big one, and I think this is one of my favorite slides, or my favorite part of the conversation, is as a provider. So remember, I started graduate school in 1995 at the University of Michigan. So if there are any Wolverines on the call, go blue. As a child provider, okay? And throughout my career, I've noticed a trend of seeing a certain type of student who has some sort of executive functioning challenge. They may have a formal diagnosis of ADHD, they may not. And these were kids who did okay enough in high school, typically bright, didn't often do homework, but still did well. And typically well-liked by students, often funny in the classroom. They would go to college, and then they would come back home. And they would come back home because they weren't able to manage all the tasks. And these kids would come back home feeling really cruddy about themselves. We also started, myself and Laura Lorenzo, we also started noticing a trend of students getting private tutoring which by the way, private tutoring is not a bad choice. I want to be clear. There's a certain type of student, though, that has ongoing private tutoring, and really what they're getting is executive functioning coaching and scaffolding. And so from my point of view, what I was seeing is kids certainly were benefiting from the tutoring, but what they weren't learning was how do they learn? How do they think about things? And what do they need to do so that eventually they might not need tutors, and eventually they might be able to get that kind of support from their peers. We also were seeing a trend with particular students, again, who are very capable intellectually, very interested in learning, but they had this perception that they were not good students, okay? And these kids had an enormous amount of negative self-talk. Then we started to pay attention that these kids are these phenotypes, right? And some of these, there's a lot of overlap. These kids eventually, when repeated effort didn't lead to traditional successes. So kids would study and study and study. Often they were studying ways that weren't good fits for their brains. And then they would still not do well. Effort ended up feeling meaningless to them. Okay, so when executive functioning challenges are misunderstood, adults often step in with more pressure, more reminders, and more consequences. Our big why here is we want to get families out of that constant power struggle because, as the other parents have said, it's not pretty in the house, okay? From the outside, it can look like your student or your child has a motivation problem or a behavior problem. From the inside, what's usually happening is a regulation and planning problem, okay? So I just want to I want to reinforce here that what we're talking about is freeing parents so parents can be parents and be relational, as opposed to having to be hall monitors. When we name executive functioning clearly and support it directly, we reduce chronic conflict and lower long-term risk for these kids. Why and how does this matter, and what do we know about it? Okay. When I started reading this material, frankly, I got really upset because of all the students and clients I had missed because of what this meant for my own children. So I'm going to go over some statistics and realities with you, but please understand that these do not equate to just because there are increased risks. This doesn't mean that this is necessarily what's going to happen or is happening for your child. Excuse me. So when it comes to executive functioning challenges, specifically when students have a diagnosis of ADHD, ADHD and substance use research consistently shows that 1 in 4 adolescents with a substance use disorder also has ADHD. And childhood ADHD significantly increases lifetime risk for substance use disorders. When kids are living in a constant state of dysregulation and repeated failure cycles, substances can become really, really appealing. And it's a way of self-medicating, and it's a way of regulating. And you can see why. Girls, excuse me, with ADHD are also substantially at higher risk for early pregnancy. I don't have statistics on boys and how much more likely boys with ADHD are likely to be fathers during adolescence. So that's why I'm talking about girls here. But girls with ADHD are at substantially higher risk for early pregnancy. So that's pregnancy during adolescence, so up to age 24. One longitudinal study in Sweden found that 15.3% of girls with ADHD had teen births, compared to 2.8% in the general population. So their peers had a 6-fold increase. Executive functioning challenges affect impulse control, planning, future-oriented thinking, and follow-through. These skills matter, and they matter in the realm of sexual health and safety. So this work is not just prevention. This work is prevention. This is not just academic support. And the skills and the cohort that we're talking about here, and it's all age appropriate. Our college cohort, we do talk about risk-taking behaviors. We do talk about substance use. We do talk about managing homework and class selection and all of that. With those starting high school, we talk about risk, and we're not as explicit because we're managing what's developmentally appropriate. Okay. Children, the last sort of thing I'm going to review here is children and adolescents with ADHD have higher rates of emergency room department visits, higher rates of psychiatric hospital stays compared with their peers without ADHD. Studies summarize that crisis-driven care, excuse me, when these students have more support and regulation, crisis-driven care is less needed and less utilized. None of this means that ADHD inevitably leads to these outcomes, okay? It does mean that executive functioning needs to go supported because risks do accumulate. And again, the good news here is even if your student or your child is at increased risk, there's a lot we can do. So what we're doing in this cohort is we're dealing with the now, but we're also trying to be protective for the years from now. So high school, college, graduate school, later decisions, mood dysregulation later in life, substance use later in life. We're strengthening planning, regulation, follow-through, and self-awareness before crises emerge. And just as importantly, we're helping parents step out of the role of the constant enforcer and into the role of being a collaborator. For those of you who are parents who are really living this, imagine what that would be like for you. Imagine what it would be like when you're leaving the house with your kid if you were a collaborator rather than an enforcer. This shift alone lowers conflict, improves relationships, and creates more room for growth. And why is this important for these kids? So, we've already talked about how these kids are at increased risk for any number of things. But as your children get ready for college, their risk of exposure to certain things, like their access to drugs, alcohol, sexual behavior, all sorts of stuff like that, you want to make sure that you have a sound relationship with your child. So when your child is in need, they will call you. And if your role, if your sole parenting relationship is about you having to manage your child's executive functioning and be an enforcer, that over time degrades the relationship. So when risk increases for these kids, we believe they're less likely to reach out to the people who love them and will give them sound advice. Anyone have any questions about that? Okay. So, what is our course about? I think we've already covered this quite a bit. We want students to feel good about themselves. We want them to understand this is not an issue of intelligence. We want them to build skills, independence, and support autonomy. Okay, so what are the services we provide? So over here on the left is our most intensive kind of service for college students. So these are people who are launching into college or are already in college. So these students start with our cohort, okay, and then when they are in college or already in college, they also have individual support from one of our executive functioning coaches. What does that look like? Well, it depends on the student. So, one of the things I worked with someone on just 2 weeks ago was looking at what courses they were going to sign up for next semester. One of the things that you may or may not know is for executive functioning, you really want to maximize what time of days work. You want to pay attention to circadian rhythm. And for those of you who are providers, this has to do with a competence daily schedule or social rhythm therapy. We want to think really strategically about what time of day is the best time for you to learn if we can. So we spent a lot of time going through all the courses. First of all, for those of us who registered for courses and it was paper and pencil, my gosh, it's more complicated now. You would think it was easier because it was a computer. It is not some kind of really difficult game of Tetris. The student kept getting overwhelmed. Frankly, I was getting overwhelmed. And so we worked through course selection by talking about the data we'd gathered with social rhythm therapy. So, again, what's the best time of day for you to do what? And then also chunking the time we were working on the system. Okay, so that's our most intensive bucket of services for college students. Then we have the foundations aspect of care. And this is for students who are about to start high school or in high school, and they just need to understand executive functioning. They need to understand how their brain works. They need to understand what are the best ways to study. So, for example, something that a lot of us never learned, I still struggle with this, is did you all know that underlining while you're reading is actually not helpful for learning? It's helpful if you're going back and you're writing a paper and you want to mark something. But if you are in a position where you have to memorize something, underlining and highlighting isn't necessarily helpful. Underlining might be helpful if you're trying to make sense of something and process something. But if you're learning Russian verbs, for example, underlining them is not going to help you memorize them. Okay. So we go over these are kids who, for the most part, can manage, but look like they need some tune ups to really be a little more successful. They might engage in mild to like slightly moderate um, what's the word I want? Procrastination. They may forget things on occasion. And these are not students who, these are students who occasionally forget to turn things in. Okay. Then we have the, excuse me, refinement program. And these are for students who just really, they're starting college or they're in college, and similar to the foundations aspect of care, these are college students who just need the course. Okay. Then we have the community aspect of our program. And later in the spring and summer, we'll be launching a parent group. And the parent group, the feedback we've received so far, and if you have an opinion, please put it in the chat. The community program is a program for parents. By the way, if your student is involved in the program, you do get copies or summaries of the slides. The feedback we've gotten about the concurrent parent group or the parent group is that folks would really like concrete information, a mixture of concrete information and support. It's another level of services we provide. Next, the next bucket we have is educational advocacy and coaching, and that's for students who may or may not have scaffolding with us, but who need help liaisoning with college and university and school, high schools in terms of accommodations and services. And really, we do a wonderful job with our educators. All of us are late career folks on being very precise with what kind of accommodations work for kids. I want to be really clear that a lot of the accommodations we use are typically boilerplate accommodations. So you have a psych testing data and it's like, okay, with this, for this student, we use this accommodation. That's very reasonable. But let me give you a real life example of where this is really important. And I just wrote, for those of you who are in Substack, I just wrote an essay about this. So a lot of times kids with ADHD, one of the accommodations they receive is time and a half or double time on tests. Well, that's actually kind of torturous for them. This is how Russell Barkley puts it. And the minute I heard this, like my brain sort of exploded. Remember, for those of you who celebrate Christmas, do you remember being 5 and like having to go to bed Christmas night? And the idea of waiting till Christmas morning felt hellacious. That's the time and a half and double time on tests. So we're telling kids who want to rush through things, who struggle to do things that are unpleasant for them, so they rush. We're telling them that they need to take more time. That really doesn't make any sense, right? What they actually need, what they actually need is help chunking the time. So they may need an hour and a half for an hour-long test, but they need an hour and a half only because what you do is after every 5 to 10 minutes, we set a timer for however amount of time the student can focus. In our case, in our house, it's about 5 minutes. So how about we work on cleaning the bathroom for 5 minutes, and then we're going to take a 5-minute break. And then you go back and you restart. So for a student who typically, when most students need 60 minutes for an exam, these students can use the full 60 minutes, but they need an hour and a half so that they can have the break time. So it's not as simple as, hey, let's just give you more time. So that's an example of some more nuanced supports that our team has spent years understanding, developing, and then also every student is different. I do have students with executive functioning challenges who do better with simple time and a half. And if someone were setting a timer with them, it would be maddening. Okay. Then we have our transition bucket of services. These are for folks who are entering high school and who will do best with our cohort and ongoing scaffolding with us. And that may be individual work after the cohort, once or twice a week, depending upon the need. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Okay. All right. So I think we've already talked about this, but what we're after here, what are you investing in? You're investing in long-term confidence, not short-term grade repair. You're investing in the relationship with your child, which long term, when you're looking at risk, is protective. You're investing in a student understanding how they learn. And you're investing in skills that carry into high school, college, and adulthood. Okay. All right. We're helping students build independence rather than relying on constant external rescue. So that's sort of like, I forgot I have a test today. Can I just not go to class, please? Or I forgot my lunch. Will you please come and help me right away? Helping your kids is fine, but when that is the method that you're employing, that's exhausting for everyone, and you're not necessarily teaching students anything. Okay. So here's here's sort of a funny personal story here. Okay. So this is my family over here on the left. This is as Pinterest oriented as we ever look. Life, it does not look this way. And on the right, this is Laura Lorenzo and her family looking all Pinteresty. Okay. And one of the reasons we wanted to do this, show you these pictures, is, in life, especially if you have kids with particular challenges, we make up that what we see on the outside is what's going on in the house. And we make up that we compare our insides to other people's outsides, right? Pinterest is notorious for that. And if you're a special needs parent, most people in your life, if they have not lived what you're living, they do not understand what it's like. So they only see the outside. So we wanted to show you the outside. And then, you ready? This is real life, people. This is what it really looks like. Okay. And the point of this slide is to say to you that we get it. We get it. So more to this point, okay, is we want you to know that we get it. And we also wanted to highlight the reality of family life when ADHD impacts the household. And that might be ADHD with a parent, that might be ADHD with a child, but it impacts the whole family system. Families are impacted by the ADHD experience. These families report more negative parent-child interactions and reduced warmth in the household.
Your nose is cold,
These parents report significantly higher parental stress. These parents report greater conflict and lower agreement between caregivers. There are higher divorce rates compared with families without a family member with ADHD, and a reduction in overall family functioning and quality of life. Higher rates of stress and depressive symptoms in mothers. So supporting executive functioning early and intentionally helps reduce chronic conflict, lowers family stress, and protects relationships over time. Again, this is not just academic support. This is relational, emotional, and developmental support. Okay, this just tells you a little bit about who we are. Basically, what you need to know is between Laura and myself, we've got 50 years of experience. We love what we do. Laura is a science teacher, a high school science teacher. In particular, her love is anatomy and physiology. And we love what we do. We're nerds, and we're really engaged, and we're good at what we do, both in the classroom and in the clinical space. Okay, so what is the program? All right. What you're signing up for initially would be 2 intake sessions that are each 45 minutes to 60 minutes. And we bill for those separately, because what we've learned over time is that if the student is not the right fit, it is not worth it. So we work on engagement and assessment during these intake sessions. Okay. And we will tell you if it's not a good fit. Okay. So that is a separate fee. The sessions are 16 weeks and they're once a week. We really work hard on engagement, and our small group format really supports that. We found that we do not assign homework. We do all the work in class, and we're developing things over time in the cohort. We are warm, relatable, and often playful, and most of the students reported really, really having a good time. And frankly, Laura and I are really funny. We're nerdy and we're funny, and we've got a great dynamic between the two of us. So, the framework of our course, we have 4 pillars of care, okay? We take the students through 4 aspects of executive functioning, and this is where our program is really, really unique. So, pillar 1 is we don't use diagnostic terms unless a student uses those terms, okay? So, pillar 1 is we talk about relative strengths and weaknesses. We have a particular assessment that we've developed that helps us with this. And then we use psych testing data and we gather information from the intake sessions. So, this part of the program is about helping students understand how their brains work, not judging them for where they struggle. Everyone has relative areas of strength and weakness. The goal is not to fix everything. I want to say that very clearly. We live in a culture where if we're not as good at something, we're supposed to practice, 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 practice. And the goal is, rather than that, is to be really intentional about the choices, about where we invest our energy. So some skills are like core muscle groups. Like you just need to work on them. So prioritization is something that if that's a relative area of weakness, we really it's essential to develop that. We want to strengthen those core muscles over time, and because or core skills like prioritization, because that's scaffold to everything else. Other areas are more like traits, and we can acknowledge and work around or support them externally in other ways rather than force students into becoming something or someone they're not. We talk openly with students about this difference. So, for example, you can train forever and still not excel at something. So, let's say I wanted to be a professional linebacker. First of all, I am 5'4", I am a woman, and I am curvy. There is no amount of wishing, willpower, time in the gym that's going to make that realistic for me. Okay. What I could do though is I could learn to love to watch football. I could learn to love sports that work for my body type that also allow me to have that kind of impact and that kind of experience and maximize my strengths. Or I could spend my life being miserable that I'm never going to be a football player. Executive functioning works much the same way. But let's say in this example, I decide that I can't be a linebacker, but I sure can be a field hockey player. Well, both football players and field hockey players need to work on their core. All right? It's just a similar foundational skill set. So students learn how to identify their natural strengths. They decide which skills are worth developing with our guidance. They accept the limitations without shame. These students have some of the most negative self-talk and shame we have ever seen because they made up that this is about lack of willpower or effort. So this approach reduces frustration, increases confidence, because students stop measuring themselves against standards that don't fit how they're put together. So essentially, they get rid of the expectation of being a linebacker when they're a 5'4" woman, curvy woman. Our focus is not about becoming good at everything. It's about becoming effective, self-aware, and strategic. That clarity we found helps students maximize strengths, support weaker areas appropriately, and make choices that actually work for their lives. Think about what your life would be like if someone had done that for you when you were younger. Okay, so the second pillar, this is where we're pretty unique in this. And again, I've referenced the negative self-talk. Our next component is self-compassion. Some parents, when they hear this, they think, well, if my student isn't hard on themselves, they won't accomplish anything. And the reality is that is absolutely, that's the opposite is true. That Self-compassion is a protective factor for executive functioning, and most of our kids, the students that we see, do not have any self-compassion, or they don't have much, or they don't even know what that would look like for them. So decades of research now show that self-compassion predicts better mental health outcomes than does self-esteem. That's a whole nother presentation. Predicts greater persistence after setbacks. So think about these students when we talked earlier about trying, and not getting the results you want. If you have a decent sense of self-compassion, you can keep going when you don't get the result you want. These students have more sustainable behavior change than self-criticism or willpower alone. And the students who have higher self-compassion show less shame-based avoidant self-talk, a greater willingness to re-engage after mistakes, and improved ability to translate goals into actions. So that's that, oh, you're telling me that you want to get your driver's license. Why aren't you studying for the test? Well, self-compassion is one of the ways we massage that, the internal desire to move through their own stuckness. So fundamentally, stress disrupts executive functioning. Surprise. And again, what do we do as parents when we notice our kids are struggling in this way? We typically pour more stress. Like, if you don't get this done by this time, this thing is going to happen. I myself have done that. I'm not proud of that, but I just didn't know any better. So self-compassion reduces the sense of the biological threat response, threat activation, which supports, when that threat response is calmed, that supports planning, flexibility, working memory, and follow through. All right. The next pillar is biology, and the kids love this. This time we're going to do a live brain dissection, and it is really, really cool for them because this is where the rubber hits the road. Okay, this is where this happens in your brain. And if you can use these other parts of your brain, this is going to help you maximize your relative areas of weakness. So why is it that if you make up a song to memorize something, you're going to be more successful? Why is it that after class, if you don't understand something and you're walking to your next class, if you talk with a classmate while walking and you try to explain it and sort through it right after class with movement, why is it that you're more likely to remember that? So we break this down biologically. So we found that if students understand how their brains work, they can be more creative about what's going to work for them. Okay. So this part is super geeky, and Laura Lorenzo hits this out of the park. For students who don't want to do live dissection via Zoom, by the way, we will have an alternate for them. All right, so pillar 4, this is the skills part, right? So by this point, we know your kid pretty well. They know us pretty well. So this is where we take everything we've put together, right? And we take the time to figure out what's the best fit. So I'm going to tell you a few of my best fits that work pretty much for everything. So I have this thing, anyone who has executive functioning challenges or struggles with lateness, for example, get rid of your digital clocks, people. Please go back to analog and get plug-in analog clocks. Because if you have an executive functioning challenge, when the battery dies, you're not going to remember to put the new battery in. Yes, you're going to have to special order it. Yes, you're going to have to, I don't know, order something that looks like it's from 1968, but apparently that's in style again. Okay. Digital clocks, it's sort of a brain trick. I'm not going to take the time to explain it, but analog clocks allow people to see the passage of time. So it makes planning easier. Okay. So another hack for the classroom would be, I've already sort of talked about the friend after class thing, but most of us probably figured out at some point in college that when you study in groups and when you teach things to other students, you are more likely to learn material faster, and it's less arduous. Okay. So, one of the things we talk about is the nuts and bolts of choosing your study partners. How do you do that? How do you approach someone? What's the script for that? What if someone says no? What if you're studying with someone and you realize it's not a good fit? So all of these things can be so overwhelming. We go through it in real detail and walk side by side with students as we try to develop the final plan for them at the end of the cohort. So, how does change happen depending upon how much assistance they get? What we find is all of this together increases motivation because students have hope. They have a stronger sense of partnership with themselves. So instead of battling, like, oh, I'm just going to sit on my backside and I'm not going to get started, or I'm going to be struggling, they're able to say, wait, I know that this is hard for me. Excuse me. I know that this is hard for me. I know this is going to be a challenge for me. But wait, if I use this particular skill, I'll be able to make this happen. Wonderful. So we see a real growth in confidence throughout the cohort, and we see a freedom to experiment, which means a decrease in fear of failure. And another thing that's consistently showing up in the literature is that success in life is about comfort with failure. We fail more than we succeed. And you know what? We're put together that way. You learn more from the failures than you do when you hit it out of the park. The good news about Laura and I is that we have a lot of great stories that illustrate that. And then folks leave with really practical strategies that have been tried. We've developed them, we've practiced them, and they, for the most part, are using them. The clock has been a really big hit with the college students. And then, as you know, if you sign up for the cohort, we are doing the Jet Pens giveaway. One of the things we walk through is, yes, indeed, the right supplies do make a difference, but what we tend to think the right supplies might be and the ideas we have about those are not actually what the literature is showing is helpful. Sidebar, I will say if you have any left-handed kids, you may want to consider Jet Pens has left-handed pens and pencils specifically. I don't know about the literature for that, but what I do know from left-handed students who struggle, they say that it just takes away some of the effort. So it just makes you writing more doable. Okay. So what's the financial investment? So you sign up for the intakes if you're a resident of Virginia and it's appropriate, and we would talk about what that looks like. We are billing the intake sessions at $175 a session, which is a reduced rate. And I can potentially bill that as a psychosocial assessment so you can be reimbursed for it through your insurance. This whole program, for most people, you can use your HSA account. Group sessions wind up being, and there's 16 sessions, $120.21 per session. Every parent gets, every kid gets 2 15-minute parent feedback sessions. So we meet with the parents typically together, and it's sort of like back to school night, but we talk about where we are at the beginning and then where we are at the end. If parents need more feedback over time, we do prorate that time and we can do more check-ins. So the overall program cost is $2,273.36. But stop. We have 2 scholarship spots. So if you go through the intake process and we think this is a good fit, we recommend everyone apply for the scholarship. It is a short essay. We are trying to find ways to make this program affordable for people. Aside from the financial investment, you're investing in an outcome that improves your students' sense of confidence, and their skills and executive functioning are improving over time. And that stuff transfers into college, high school, and life. And that also reduces long-term risk and increases family harmony. You're investing in freeing up to be in relationship with your kid, not to be always in the management position with your kid. Okay. Again, the 2 full scholarship spots. We do have payment plans. Most people prefer to pay each week. We do have a biweekly payment plan, and sometimes people have to spread out their payments even more. We do that for people. And again, most people are able to use their HSA account. That depends. And it's a little more complicated than that. The enrollment commitment, because the group requires group cohesion, right? We really need folks to come to every session. If you miss 1 session or 2 sessions, that's fine, but we do not provide makeup sessions. We will provide folks with the materials, and also parents do get either copies of the slides at the end or a summary of the slides at the end of every week. If you're interested, if you're ready to schedule your intake visit, this is how you do it. info@parentsandchildrenproject.com, or our phone number, which is here, and you'll be speaking with Jeannie to set up an intake appointment. If you have more questions and you want to talk with me or do what's called a consultation, that is a 15 to 20-minute conversation. And again, reach out to us here and Jeannie will arrange a time for you to meet with me. Intake visits are either booked with me and or Laura and me, depending. And we're doing those intake sessions. We've already done a few of those already. And so our cohort is filling up pretty quickly. It looks like we may be running several cohorts at the same time because these are becoming really, really popular. So that's the presentation for the evening. As I said, we were going to be done with under an hour. What questions do folks have? I'm going to change my visual here. There we go. Jeannie, can you let me know if we have any questions?
All right, man. We do not right now.
Okay.
Not yet.
Okay. So let me just say to folks, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time. I know this is a busy time of the evening. I know everyone is probably tired and ready to do bedtime or go to bed. We're wishing you well. I'm going to stay on here for another few minutes if some questions come up, but please feel free to reach out to us. Okay. May you be well and have a good evening, and stay healthy, please, if you can. Avoid whatever this is.
In this life, in this life, one too many years, sometimes to eyelids on a facelift. Mind over matter is magic, I do magic. If you think about it, no time is best life.
We're going to send you off with the rest of White Ferrari by Frank Ocean. So your nervous system can chill as you go into the evening. And we'll say goodbye when the song's over. Keep in mind, you can always reach out to us with questions at info@parentsandchildrenproject.com or text or call us at 657-749-8645.
It's just a scullies, that's what they call it. It won't freeze apart.